Let's move on, Krystal, to, as you said, the hostage situation, the human cost of this conflict that should always be kept at the forefront of this. The hostages are also, sadly, very much a political question because they're at the center of the conflict over, when humanitarian aid is going to be applied. They're at the center of the conversation between the U.S. and Israel about whether Israel should, lift some parts of the blockade, should allow Gazans, Palestinians to have certain things, water, all of that. It is just another horrific part of this that, again, feels like it gets worse by the hour, by the day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as you said, Emily, these are innocent human beings who are now being used as pawns. Hamas intentionally took them to use them as human sacrificial bargaining chips. It's horrific. They should be released immediately. Richard Engel over at MSNBC spoke with someone from Hamas, and they indicated that they will only release these hostages if Israel stops the bombing. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
So I spoke to a short while ago a senior Hamas official inside Gaza, and I asked for clarification. I said, are you still willing to release foreign hostages? And what do you mean that you would do it if the field conditions are right? And he said that not only are they willing to release all foreign hostages, meaning even Israelis who have second passports, but also all Israeli civilians if the bombings stop. That's what they mean. If the bombings stop, he said that all of the civilian hostages, Israeli and foreigner, could be released, he said, in 1 hour, that it would be easy. I pressed him on it. I said, well, why don't you just release them now? If you want to release these hostages, just take them to the border of Gaza and let them go. Take them to a safe place, put them in a car and let them go. And he said it was impossible. He said it was impossible because Israel is bombing everywhere, that there is no safe place.
So there you go. So that's the Hamas line. Keep in mind, this was before the hospital bombing. So, who knows how that has impacted their comments or what they would say at this point. On the Israeli side, we can put this up on the screen. They're saying they're also using these hostages in a sense. They said they will only allow humanitarian aid in to benefit, innocent civilians in Gaza if the hostages are released. So they're holding humanitarian aid hostage until these hostages are released. So, these are innocent people who were taken by Hamas, who are now being used as these political pawns. It's an incredibly, obviously horrific, emotional, fraught issue, not only for the families of the hostages, some of whom are American, by the way, but also for Israeli society. Overall, it has emerged as a real dividing line in terms of Israelis and the approach that they're seeking. I'll also say, Emily, there was a comment from perhaps the most extreme member of Netanyahu's cabinet, which is the most extreme government in Israeli history. The National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, wrote on social media after the hospital bombing that hundreds of tons of explosives should enter the region instead of aid to the besieged Gaza Strip, as long as there are no Israeli captives left in the hands of Palestinian groups. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I was going to mention that too. And I think that's probably something that Joe Biden, part of the reason that the United States, let's put the political reasons aside, part of the reason the United States wanted a presence there. And, I continue to think it's kind of a strange decision for him to actually take the trip. But I still think part of those conversations is about the Ben-Gvir position, because the United States knows it is not a tenable position for the U.S. Again, we mentioned this earlier in the show. They give about 20% of the aid from Americans, military aid from Americans, ends up, that's about 20% of the Israeli military budget every single year. So they know it's not a tenable position for them to support Israel while humanitarian aid is being basically left out. I mean, this is another entirely horrific scene unfolding in Egypt at the Rafah crossing, where you have humanitarian aid that is actually piling up on the other side of the crossing. Gazans that need the humanitarian aid. And just there has not been a solution to finding a way to get A to B, whether Gazans come across into Egypt, whether the humanitarian aid is brought into Egypt. You have the Ben Gvir people who say the only thing that should be coming through is military resources, no humanitarian aid until the hostages are released. That is, in some ways, the saddest part, is that for so many people, the help is right there, but we have not worked out a diplomatic solution for the help to get to them. And so I think, part of the reason Biden is in the area right now, and that Blinken, who was, made to wait like 8 hours by MBS for a meeting the other day, Biden's meeting with Jordan, as we mentioned, was canceled. Not going well. This diplomacy is not going well for the United States. The sort of in-person push for diplomacy not going well. But part of the reason that they're doing it is certainly because that question of humanitarian aid and hostage timing is absolutely crucial to getting support for Israel, for the United States on the world stage, continuing to convince people that that's sort of the righteous cause as the weeks go on. You had unity in the wake of Hamas's barbaric, horrific attack, maintaining international unity in the weeks after, when you're actually engaged in a war, is more difficult. And I think the hostages are, the negotiations over the hostages have become one of the most important, sadly, pawns in their negotiating right now.
Yeah, and it's humiliating for the U.S. too. I mean, we've had Jake Sullivan and Biden talking about, we want to get this aid in and we're working on a solution. They even told American citizens that they would be able to have safe crossing into Egypt. They showed up at this border. The border is still closed. In fact, the border is still being bombed by Israel as of, I believe, yesterday or 2 days ago. So, for the Biden administration, the United States government, supposedly this powerful actor, to put out these promises of like, we're going to work this out and it's already been worked down. You can show up at the border, and then have absolutely nothing happen. It just shows our sort of complete impotence in the situation, which I don't think is, if we were willing to actually use the incredible leverage we have in the situation, we wouldn't be so impotent, but we're not willing to. And Sagar and I talked about how it's very reminiscent of how in Ukraine, we also have adopted this incredibly impotent posture where it's like, well, we don't really want Zelensky using weapons in Russia, but we're not really going to do anything about it either. What are you going to do? It's a very similar dynamic here. If they actually wanted to get humanitarian aid in, believe me, they have a lot of leverage in the situation and they could make it happen, but it has clearly not been the top priority. And just to remind people, like, Palestinians are not all Hamas. Almost a majority of people in Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza, are children. You have hundreds of American citizens who are trapped in Gaza right now, which obviously should be a priority for an American president. So they are running out, in addition to the, incredible bombing campaign and the horrors of that, very limited food, water, no electricity. It is a true humanitarian catastrophe that we are witnessing right now, with seemingly no end in sight.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.